The tension between the United States and China has always been one to look out for, largely due to the size and global dominance of both countries. For both of them, it's always the case, what you can do, I can do much better. In the tech world, both countries have gone toe-to-toe in the last decade, with companies from both countries entering each other's territories, in search for more customers, products and ultimately, more dominance. However, in the recent years, the United States, in a bid to prevent leaks of sensitive information and breaches of security, has significantly raised its way to scrutinizing Chinese companies coming into its country. The general notion is that the United States government doesn't like them, particularly tech giant Huawei, which has come under increased pressure. This move has left several people asking, why does the US government not like the Chinese companies like Huawei? Well, keep watching to find exactly why. Founded in 1987 in China and headquarters in Shenzhen, Huawei has grown to become one of the largest tech companies in China. To measure how big it really is, it's like playing Verizon's significant role in the United States telecommunication industry while having Google's name recognition. On a global scale, Huawei is the second largest seller of smartphones, ahead of the United States giant Apple, and only just behind Samsung. Aside from its consumer home electronic products, Huawei business is segmented into smart devices, cloud devices, and telecommunications network. In the grand scheme of things, Huawei can be considered a young company. But here is where the story of Huawei's history gets interesting, or prone to severe questioning regarding its credibility. The founder, Ren Zhengfei, began the company right after he was dismissed from China's People's Liberation Army, using his military background and connection to secure large contracts for Huawei. This is why the United States government later viewed the company as a de facto branch of the Chinese government. Since its inception, Huawei has constantly faced criticism and scrutiny for its alleged involvement in stealing intellectual property and technologies from other companies and passing them off as its own property. In all of the accusations, there were few times the company was proven guilty, such as the Cisco's case 2003. Other times, the accusation never led to any confirmation. Towards the end of the 2000s, Huawei experienced exponential growth as it started acquiring several other companies in a bid to expand its operation. However, whenever the company tried to expand its global operations by acquiring a non-Chinese company, the deal was blocked by regulatory bodies. And in several instances where the regulatory body sabotaging the deal was Huawei's long-standing ties with China and the possible security threat it represents. Eventually, the company began producing smartphones, and they soon became largely popular due to their attractive designs and affordable price tags. By 2016, the company announced that in the next 5 years, it would be the largest smartphone manufacturer in the world, and they weren't exactly wrong. In 2018, Huawei surpassed Apple to become the second largest smartphone manufacturer, second to Samsung. Considering Huawei faced the huge challenge of not being present in the United States market, this was a remarkable feat. While Huawei had in excess of $100 billion in revenue in 2018, it isn't exactly what people would refer to as an ordinary technology company. The Donald Trump administration was not having it. Several experts and officials in the United States government and the world have a similar opinion. Why? For several years, the FBI congressional committees, NSA and others have repeatedly pointed out close ties between Huawei and the Chinese Communist Party. This led to the United States government placing a ban on Huawei, preventing it from bidding on government contracts. During a Senate Intelligence Committee hearing in February 2018, some top intelligence chiefs in the United States government stated that Huawei, ZTE, another Chinese company, posed a potential security risk on a national level to the United States, warning American companies of the dangers of entering into business with them. FBI Director Christopher Wray said in his testimony, "We are deeply concerned about the risk of allowing any company or entity that is beholden to foreign governments that don't share our values or gain position of power inside our telecommunication networks that provides the capacity to exert pressure or control over our telecommunication infrastructure. It provides the capacity to modify or steal information maliciously, and it provides the capacity to conduct undetected espionage. The point made was that the United States officials were worried and fearful of the possibility that Huawei would assist the Chinese government in spying or attacking the United States. In response to the possible threat posed by Huawei, former US President Donald Trump, in May 2019, issued an executive order that stopped all companies in the United States from using communications and information technology from anyone the US considered a threat to its national security. He also declared a state of emergency on the issue. On the same day of Donald Trump's declaration, the United States Department of Commerce placed Huawei and 70 of its known associates on the entry list, a trade blacklist that prevents anyone from it purchasing part of the US company without the approval of the government. In reaction to this development, some firms in the United States started backing away from their business dealings with Huawei. At the time, the Commerce Department didn't entirely clamp down on Huawei. In an interview with Fox Business Network, Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross stated that the department would grant a further 90 days to reprieve and issue limited exemption to reduce disruption for some ongoing business until November. The extended time allowed Huawei to purchase US-made goods to keep its existing telecommunication networks and provide software updates to its existing mobile phones. Wilbur said, "We're giving them a little more time to wean themselves off." The extra time came as a surprise to several top officials at the time, because the then President Donald Trump had already suggested to reporters that it wouldn't happen. One of the major reasons why the United States does not entertain the idea of Huawei, talking more of liking the company, it is to worry that Huawei could assist or enable the Chinese government to do to the United States. Scott Kennedy, the Deputy Director of the Freeman Chair in China Studies at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, explained that Huawei is the emblem of a variety of fears about China and its technological prowess packed into a single company. However, many of the concerns are not necessarily about what it has done, but what it might do. Business and political leaders from the United States have the long time developed an anxiety over the constant rise of high-tech drives from Beijing that are specifically designed to eclipse the technological powers of the West, an area the US holds dearly and does not want to be overtaken. Over the years, Huawei's approach has been to remain a development and research powerhouse. In 2018, the company stated that it would be increasing its annual spending on R&D by a further $5 billion from the previous $20 billion. And it has over 10,000 patents in China and overseas. That has played into question about how much access the US market has given Chinese companies amid the concern for intellectual property rights. These worries eventually led to a more animated Trump's trade war, which, at least for his advisors, the military and the US intelligence community, became much more than the trade deficit he often lamented about at the time. Several intelligence chiefs issued warnings about the national security implications of China's technology outpacing the United States or being used for heinous purposes. Particularly, officials grew increasingly worried about companies like Huawei selling products with backdoors that allow the Chinese government to gain access to surveillance or data. Alternatively, they were worried about the possibility of Huawei handing over collect data to the Chinese government. Since China has become more nationalistic, the possibilities that the US and China might end up in a tangle are higher, Kennedy said. While there were claims of a possible backdoor, the director of the Digital and Cyberspace Policy Program at the Council of Foreign Relations, Adam Segal, noted that there haven't been any smoking guns yet on the risks surrounding Huawei's use of now popular 5th generation technology, or 5G. Adam Segal explained that Huawei was one of the several companies with stakes in the race to offer the next generation of wireless technology, and is also one of the top providers of the products that allow superfast 5G networks globally. The United States also pressured some of its allies to look for alternatives, seeking a future where every area of people's everyday lives is connected to these networks, opening them to surveillance and manipulation. Siegel said, is going to involve so much data passing over the systems, and in particular, the concern would be more of the Internet of Things and autonomous cars. Although the Trump administration began the full crackdown on Huawei, the US government has been sounding the alarm about them for a long while. Bloomberg's Ali Lake explained the worries about Huawei came originally from the company's founder, Ren Zhifei's association with the People's Liberation Army before founding the company. Fears have increased since China passed its National Intelligence Law and other cybersecurity law in 2017, which Lake says compels corporations to assist in offensive intelligence operations rather than require them to cooperate with law enforcement relations to national security matters. In 2011, Huawei, in an open letter to the US government, denied security concerns and requested a proper investigation from American officials, with the aim to prove that the company is a normal communication institution and nothing more. The letter was prompted in 2012, reported on Huawei and ZTE by the House Intelligence Committee. Although the report didn't exonerate the company as it had hoped, the committee stated that Huawei did not fully cooperate with the investigation and was unwilling to explain its relationship with the Chinese government or Chinese Communist Party. It concluded that the US should view the suspicion with continued penetration of the US telecommunication market by the Chinese telecommunication companies. By January 2018, Huawei suffered another blow when AT&T backed down from a deal that was supposed to see Huawei sell its smartphones in the United States. By March of that year, the Federal Communications Commission introduced a rule that would stop companies in the United States from using money from the Universal Service Fund on equipment services from China. The fund aims to provide subsidies to boost wireless, broadband, and phone services to rural communities. While the United States has a long-standing dislike for Chinese companies like Huawei, one of the significant issues with its accusations against the companies, which goes back to over a decade, is the lack of specific evidence backing them. Andy Purdy, the Chinese telecom giant chief security officer in the US, explained that there's skepticism around the rise of China, and people are increasingly worried about national security. He later explained that people just use bold statements about Huawei without having anything to back them up. In several ways, Purdy might have been right. The accusations on Huawei by the United States were only clearly outlined in 2019 through court cases against Huawei's CFO, involving specific allegations of Iran sanctions violations, as well as trade secrets case in Seattle that had already been settled in civil court. However, none of these allegations reached the national security threat level as outlined by Donald Trump and other previous administrations. There is also a chance that the allegations might even be hypocritical and could be a dynamic that can affect the United States and its relationship with its allies. While referring to some revelations that the United States had been monitoring diplomatic phone calls and Germany ignoring US warning on Huawei, Purdy said the US used American companies in this way, as was revealed at the time of the Edward Snowden revelation. I don't think that Angela Merkel has forgotten about having her cell phones monitored. Despite the lack of evidence against Huawei by the United States government, former Homeland Security Secretary Michael Chertoff said the government's stance on the company is also based on a common-sense reading of the situation, citing that any country with political aims will most likely do the same. He said, "I can't be very specific, but what I tell you is a matter of common sense. There is no question, there are the very big companies that are viewed as national champions. Huawei finds itself at the center of a trade war between China and the US, because it portrays all of Donald Trump's trade arguments like allegations of spying and intellectual property theft, unfair market practices, and China's desire to gain control over the technical edge of the West." Chertoff made an example of the Chinese government response to the arrest of Huawei CFO Meng Wanzhou in Canada, and the arrest of some Canadian citizens in China, as a way to describe how Huawei and the country appears to have close links. He said, "And if you are a Chinese company and you choose not to honor the government's suggestions, that can be a problem." While many may argue that the United States has no concrete reason, other than fear, to dislike Huawei, situations from other countries suggest otherwise. Some notable democratic countries have also taken actions against Huawei. The government of the United Kingdom issued a ban on Huawei, instructing its domestic network operations to remove any and all equipment belonging to Huawei from their 5G systems by 2027. The decision to ban Huawei reversed an earlier decision by the UK to allow the tech company to introduce its 5G technology into not more than 35% of the country's network in non-core areas. Shortly after the UK took steps against Huawei, the Indian government also allegedly instructed its two state-run telecommunication companies to refrain from using any Chinese telecom equipment and upgrading the network. In July 2020, Reuters reported that the French government told telecommunications operators that licenses for Huawei gear will no longer be renewed. While this wasn't an outright ban, it was aimed at preventing firms from using Huawei's equipment. The former US Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, stated that the former US Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, stated that the tide is turning against Huawei as citizens around the world are waking up to the dangers of the Chinese Communist Party surveillance state. From a non-political view, is it really true or possible that the global tide is shifting away from Huawei's 5G telecommunication tech? And is the United States government dislike of the company finally getting it banned around the world? Mike Pompeo might be right that Huawei currently have less advantage than it did a few years ago. However, deciding if the US can take credit for this global trend against Huawei is a little bit tricky. Decisions from other countries have also indicated the adoption of Huawei's 5G tech is shifting, even if the official announcements didn't directly refer to the company. In June 2020, Denmark's Ministry of Defense said that the country is working to exclude 5G suppliers that aren't incorporated in security-aligned countries. Also in June, Huawei lost good ground in Singapore as some top telecommunications company, including Singapore Telecommunications Company, choose Nokia and Ericsson over Huawei to supply significant portions of the country's 5G networks. The actions of some countries have seen their relationships with China become worse. For example, the United Kingdom officials were initially closing in on a multilateral democratic coalition on 5G options for Huawei before the ban was announced. But that wasn't just it. The UK was also previously vocal in condemning the Chinese government about its new national security law and an authoritarian crackdown in Hong Kong, which caused tension in the China-UK relations in 2019. India was another prime example of the collapsing relationship with the Chinese government. First, the border violence between both countries caused the death of over 20 Indian soldiers. The aftermath of this event saw strong calls for India to boycott Chinese goods. By June 2020, the Indian government announced that it was banning 59 Chinese apps for use in its country, including its popular video sharing app, TikTok, which had the highest number of global users in India. The list also includes the popular messaging app WeChat. Should any further tension arise between both countries, India remains strongly likely to ban Huawei. Like the United States, several countries have also become increasingly concerned that Huawei might act explicitly on the Chinese government's orders to collect user data and certain content. However, unlike the US, which took public measures against Huawei, other countries have shown their concern through subtle strategies and policies by representatives in closed-door meetings or digital supply chain security. Regardless of the approach of several countries, Huawei remains a constant subject of anxiety in different parts of the world. 5G is a critical and essential telecommunications technology, with applications in several areas. And there are significant reasons for countries to be worried about the national security risk posed by Huawei's relationship with the Chinese government. But even if the governments of some countries are changing their stance on allowing or at least not discouraging the use of Huawei's equipment in 5G networks, it doesn't necessarily have a direct link with the public crackdown by the Trump administration. In this context, domestic political factors play a significant role. The changing stances in India cannot be separated from the increasing political tension between India and China. The same goes for the decisions of the UK government and its heightened tension with the Chinese government. In some instances, like in Singapore, where the government restricted Huawei's grip on 5G systems without an outright ban, in a decision that's perhaps not quite the alignment the administration might tout. Singapore's stance also further highlights that some countries are still facing a tricky situation in managing their relationship with Beijing and Washington. And in light of a largely contradictory, poorly executed and confused US diplomatic attempt to convince its allies to ban Huawei, it would be a huge leap to attribute the changes to Trump's administration, which has been a clear mix of security and economic approach with straightforward political motives. For example, in 2018, President Trump suggested that he may stop all efforts to persecute a certain Huawei official if it would help the United States secure trade concession from the Chinese government. In essence, real security risks were used as political props in a trade war. However, this is not only to say that President Trump's administration's constant sanctions on Huawei didn't have an impact. Before the United Kingdom issued a ban on Huawei, the Secretary of State for Digital, Media, Culture and Sport, Oliver Dowden, indicated that UK's position could be changed. A spokesperson from Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, explained that the United States' sanctions on Huawei could affect Britain's decision to adopt Huawei in its network system. In the same way, The Telegraph reported before the ban was issued that an internal report from the UK government cited the United States sanctions as reasons to reassess further the security risk posed by Huawei because more restrictions would force the company to utilize untrusted technology and increase the risk posed to the United Kingdom. Without a doubt, posturing and politics were the main reason for Trump's administration's actions against companies like Huawei. Despite the real security risk it posed, the real risks and political drivers are not manually exclusive, and recognizing the fundamental problem with how the Trump administration handled the Huawei saga is necessary for understanding the United States' campaign against Huawei and its aim to create a better policy on similar issues going forward. If you enjoyed watching the video, do leave a like and subscribe to this channel for more interesting stories and hidden secrets.